In 1944, deep inside the Brazilian Amazon, two missionaries, Father Augusto Moretti and Brother Elias Navarro, vanished while navigating a quiet stretch of the Rio Jutaí. They had left their small mission post at dawn to deliver medicine to an isolated community 3 hours upstream. It was a routine boat trip they had completed dozens of times. But when local rubber tappers found their canoe drifting silently near the riverbank at noon, everything inside it was intact. Medical crates unopened, letters neatly wrapped, lanterns still burning, lunches untouched, both men's sandals neatly placed at the bow, but the missionaries were gone. There were no signs of struggle, no drag marks, no overturned boat, no blood, no torn clothing, and most disturbing of all, no footprints on the muddy banks, even though the mud captured every animal track with perfect precision. It was impossible to leave the canoe without leaving evidence. Witnesses later claimed they heard screams echoing through the trees that morning, but the jungle swallowed the sound so quickly they couldn't tell where it came from. This is the complete reconstruction of the disappearance of two men swallowed not by water, not by predators, but by something the river has never returned. Before we begin the investigation, please subscribe so you don't miss the next story. And tell me, from which city and country are you listening today? The Amazon of the 1940s was a world where maps lied. Entire tributaries twisted into places cartographers never documented. Villages existed for decades before outsiders ever learned their names. Rivers shifted courses overnight, sounds traveled unpredictably, and shadows could move without wind. The region surrounding the Rio Jutaí, straddling Brazil's western Amazon, was especially notorious for its silence. A silence locals described as pesado, heavy, as if the forest was constantly listening. The missionaries assigned to that region rarely traveled alone. But Father Augusto, an Italian known for his calm voice and steady courage, trusted the river. At 57, he believed he understood its moods. Brother Elias, 29, followed him like a son. Together, they had built a small chapel and infirmary for the riverside families, and despite the dangers, they had become beloved figures in the area. Their trip on May 18, 1944, should have been simple. The water level was stable, the sky clear, the current gentle. The river was unusually calm, almost too calm. Hours later, the empty canoe was found, drifting slowly in circles. Searchers would spend the next 12 days combing the river and the forest. They would find belongings, signs of paws, objects placed strangely, but never footprints, never bodies, never definitive answers. The last journey, what the missionaries said and did. The morning of May 18th began without any sign of trouble. The missionaries woke before sunrise. Father Augusto prepared tea while Brother Elias packed gauze, quinine, and letters into their wooden crates. Locals who visited the chapel remembered them laughing about how calm the river felt. The water was as flat as polished stone. At 6:12 a.m., they pushed their canoe into the water. A fisherman named João do Rio, casting nets nearby, later testified. They waved. The river was calm. Nothing unusual. Nothing. He watched them paddle upriver until the trees swallowed their silhouettes. Along the route, the missionaries stopped at a small sandbar to adjust their load. Evidence later confirmed this. Their footprints were perfectly preserved on the sand. This was the only time investigators ever found their prints. From that point on, everything becomes a fog of contradictions. According to two rubber tappers working in the forest around 9 a.m., distant screams echoed downstream. The men argued afterward about what they heard. One said it sounded like two voices. The other insisted it sounded like a single shout, long and warped, as if pulled apart by the trees. Both agreed on one thing. The sound died too fast, swallowed unnaturally. Screams normally travel far along river channels, but these seemed to collapse into silence. Meanwhile, along a separate stretch of the river, children from a riverside family swore they heard a wooden object hitting the water repeatedly, as if something kept bumping the canoe. They saw no canoe at the time, but the detail would matter later. The missionaries were expected to reach a small community by 11 a.m. They never arrived. At 12:03 p.m., the empty canoe was found drifting near a bank, but the river was too slow to have carried it far. Investigators later calculated the canoe must have been abandoned between 10:40 and 11:10 a.m. In other words, the disappearance was fast, extremely fast. What happened in that narrow window remains the central riddle of the case. The canoe that should not be empty. The canoe found by rubber tappers was not smashed, overturned, or damaged. It drifted lazily along the edge of the river, its bow gently tapping a log, creating a rhythmic thump-thump, thump-thump. Inside, everything looked wrong. 1. The sandals. Both pairs of sandals were placed side by side at the bow, neatly aligned. Missionaries did not remove sandals in canoes. The boards were too hot and splinters too common. Why were they off? 2. The lantern. A kerosene lantern still glowed faintly, its flame dancing inside the glass. Someone had lit it recently, but why light a lantern during daylight? 3. The medical crates completely untouched. No struggle, no spill, no sign of flailing arms knocking things over. 4. The paddles. 2 paddles lay crossed inside the canoe, something missionaries never did, as crossing paddles was considered bad luck among river communities. 5. The water in the bottom of the canoe. A thin layer of river water pooled at the bottom, but it was perfectly still, meaning the canoe had drifted without turbulence. Explanations proposed that they fell overboard, but the river was shallow along the edges. A fall would leave splashes, drag marks, handprints, disturbed mud, footprints of someone trying to climb out. There was none of that. The bank near the canoe was pristine, so pristine that investigators placed their own footprints beside it for contrast. The mud accepted prints instantly. Even a bird landing left deep impressions. Yet neither missionary left a single print. At 1:40 p.m., the search officially began. Over the next days, investigators would realize something chilling. The canoe was not abandoned. It was prepared, but not by the missionaries. The forest that gives echoes in the wrong direction. Search efforts focused on the forest behind the bank, where they expected to find tracks leading into the trees. They found none. But the forest itself behaved strangely. 1. Sound traveled wrong. When searchers shouted, the echoes bounced in incorrect directions. A yell aimed at the river bounced back from the forest. A call into the forest returned from behind them. Local men, experienced in the jungle, grew uneasy. "This forest is folding the sound," one whispered. 2. Animals avoided the area. There were no monkey calls, no bird cries, no humming insects. An impossibility in the Amazon. The silence was total. Rubber tappers even noticed the absence of leaf movement. "The air is not passing here," they said. 3. The trail with no beginning. Around 4:30 p.m., a team found a short trail of broken leaves, as if something heavy had moved through. But the trail started abruptly, with no footprints or marks leading into it. A trail with no beginning. And it ended just as abruptly, with no signs of exit. 4. The rope. A rope belonging to Brother Elias was found tied to a tree branch, knotted in a way neither missionary used. The knot was old, frayed, weathered, but the rope itself was new. How does new rope acquire old knots? 5. The note. In Father Augusto's journal, recovered from the canoe, the last line read, "O rio está estranho hoje. Ele devolve tudo, menos o som." The river is strange today. It returns everything, except the sound. The sentence was incomplete, cut mid-stroke. Something interrupted him. What? Investigators could not say, but the note hinted at what they all felt. Something was wrong with the river, not physically but structurally, as if space itself bent in that stretch of water. Theories, official, cultural, and the ones no one wanted to write down. Investigators proposed explanations, none sufficient. 1. Accidental drowning dismissed quickly. Bodies should have resurfaced within 48 hours. Searchers dredged the river for 12 days. Nothing. 2. Animal attack. Caiman, anaconda, jaguar. All ruled out immediately. No blood, no torn fabric, no thrashing of water, no drag marks. Predators do not leave sandals neatly aligned. 3. River pirates, impossible. No sign of theft, no missing crates, no disturbance of the canoe. And pirates leave footprints. 4. Abandonment or escape, completely illogical. Missionaries did not leave calmly in silence. And to leave without sandals onto hot forest soil? Impossible. 5. Indigenous warnings. Elders from the Kanamari and Madiha groups stated the river had a place called Yanapuku, the hollow water, a zone where voices mute, echoes return wrong, travelers feel watched, canoes drift without current, and the water takes without swallowing. They described it as a place where the river opens its second mouth. One elder told investigators, "The forest hides bodies, the river hides screams." When asked what that meant, he replied, "You disappear before you know you are disappearing." The investigators did not include this in the official report. The final signs and the thing they found on day 12. By day 10, hope had collapsed. But on day 11, strange reports emerged. 1. Lights on the river. 3 separate searchers swore they saw faint lights gliding above the water at dawn. Not fireflies, not lanterns, but smooth white glows moving slowly upstream. When they approached, the lights vanished instantly. 2. The repeating sound. At sunset, several men heard a rhythmic splash. Thump, 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 matching the exact sound described by the children the day of the disappearance. But when they paddled toward it, nothing was there. 3. The shadow on the shore. One searcher claimed he saw a shadow crouched near the bank. But when he aimed his lantern, the shadow did not move or run. It simply flattened and evaporated. 4. The final discovery. Day 12. On the last day of the search, a crate was found upriver, sitting on a sandbar, perfectly dry despite the night rain. Inside the crate, gauze, quinine, letters, and at the bottom, wrapped in cloth, Brother Elias's crucifix. But the cloth was tied in a knot. The exact same old frayed knot found on the rope from earlier. Something else. The crucifix was warm, and the sand below the crate was untouched, smooth, flawless, showing the crate had been placed, not washed ashore. Investigators stared at the scene for a long time. Nobody spoke. Nobody could. The disappearance of Father Augusto Moretti and Brother Elias Navarro remains one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries in the history of the Amazon. 2 experienced men, aboard a stable canoe on a calm river, vanished without leaving footprints, splashes, or a single displaced leaf. Their belongings remained orderly, unnatural in their arrangement. Their disappearance left no physical trace, only echoes that died too quickly. Whether they were victims of a silent catastrophe, a rare natural phenomenon, or something older than the forest itself, the truth dissolved into the river the same way their voices did. The Amazon has never offered answers, only silence, heavy and suffocating. Residents along the Rio Hutai claim that even today, on some dawns, the river becomes too quiet. They say that if you listen carefully, you can hear faint knocking against a wooden hull, like paddles tapping an empty canoe. And some claim that, on rare nights, 2 soft lights glide over the water before dissolving into the mist. The river hides everything, even screams. Thank you for listening to this investigation. Please subscribe so you don't miss the next story. And tell me, from which city and country are you listening today?